We're back talking about origin, and this is hard, so I should probably read. But before that, so a separation, um, according to origin, so two things that are opposed to each other cannot exist together. Water and fire, he says, so they're opposites, kind of like yin and yang. And there is a separation that occurs when you are an opposite. Um, all right. So chapter whatever, it's 25. That the separation which arises from foreknowledge does not do away with free will, because God has foreknowledge, but you still have free will, he says. So I have to go look up Psalm 50 or 50, whatever. It's 57, 58. And I have to go look up serpent now because the poison is like the poison of a serpent. Because it's talking about the wicked are estranged from wound, they go astray as soon as they are born, speaking lies. Their poison is like the poison of a serpent. So I looked up serpent in here, and it's using Ophios, and there's no mention of Erion, which I think is a bird, because if you think about avian, I think it's a bird, Aryan. Like that's where the word for like the Aryans, like the race of people, they're the birds. So after it mentions Ophios, it mentions like an asp, or it like little, it's called an aspidos, and I mean, clearly you can name a type of snake an asp. But the big concern is there are no periods like anywhere. Like I marked the periods. Like, do you see how long it goes without a period? They're marked with red lines. I made sure you can see it. Like they're not there. But clearly you'd say, well, that period's from like the red marks above are from the previous psalm, which is true. But like, why is there no period in the entire psalm? I think it's a monument inscription psalm, just so you know. Like we figured out monument inscription psalms are like memorial psalms that like everyone tried to destroy the psalms. Like the last thing they ever want you to read is the psalms. So here Origen says where like kind of where the black thing points to, that's where I always start. So we must not therefore suppose that the foreknowledge of God is the cause of future events, but inasmuch as these events would follow the agent's own impulses, on this account he foreknew, for he knoweth all things before they be, and inasmuch as he knoweth all things before they be, and inasmuch as he knoweth all things before they be, he foreknew certain individuals and foreordained them to be conformed to the image of his son. All right, so conform to the image of his son, like, what does that mean? Like Zeus sure has a lot of children. It sure seems like a lot of people look like Katy Perry, like that many. So the real question is like, is there a difference between like foreknowledge and perfect foreknowledge? Like perfect like knowledge of the future and like non-perfect knowledge of the future. Clearly, there's a big difference, and there's an assumption like God exists like outside of time, like God exists with time, like God exists with reality, like God is not a part of reality, and so like God knows all things always, and like God's knowledge is like absolute, like God's knowledge like can never grow. So we'll just read what Origen says at the top. And if anyone objects and asks whether what God foreknows might possibly not occur, we shall say it possibly might not. But granting this possibility, there is no necessity that it should occur or not occur, and the events will not in the least be necessitated, but there is also the possibility of their not occurring. He goes on to say, like, if you're a skilled logician, like if you're skilled in like logical thinking, like you know like that you can't close possibilities of certain things. So everyone's heard the verse, all things work together for good. Like this has gone into the commentary on Romans, which I haven't even read yet. It's a lot of stuff about justice. Like we've talked about like on my past videos about the Greek word for justice versus right, and I didn't actually talk about the word, but I said like they have words for it, and like the Greek concept of justice, which was complicated, but then they're like using justice clearly, like what is just is what's good, because it's a synonym for good, but is there a difference? Like what's good could be like killing people, I think, or what's just, but what's right, I don't know. It probably could be too, because it gets translated as right. So a lot of this passage that I'm for some reason going into so much detail about is about like being separated from your mother's womb and the concept of separation. You'll never understand it unless I read this. So one, the third point is to note the third point to notice is the phrase separated unto the gospel of God. And in the epistle of Galatians, the apostle says the same thing about himself. When it was the good pleasure of God who separated me even from my mother's womb to reveal his son in me, they who do not understand that anyone who is predestined through the foreknowledge of God is the cause of the events foreknown, take hold of such expressions as these. All right. He goes on to quote, the wicked are estranged from the womb in Psalms. So, like, what does that mean? Well, clearly, like, someone who's taken out of the womb is, like, Isus, who's, like, kind of put into the world. Because, like, what's the womb like? It's easy, it's better. Like, the womb is nice. Like, is the world nice? World isn't nice. Ask Isus. We'll just read, starting at where the black is pointing to. Perhaps then it was under these conditions that God separated him from his mother's womb. God saw the cause of the just separation, viz., that Apollon would buffet his body and bring it into bondage because he feared lest, having preached to others, he himself might be rejected, and that knowing there would be woe to him unless he preached the gospel, being moved with fear toward God, so that he might not be in woe, he would not hold his peace, but would preach the gospel. So Aphrodite was the mother of Aeneas. Don't worry, I'm going back to it. So Apollon, he says, was separated from his mother's womb, Paul. And we'll read from where the black line is pointing. So, and this he also saw who separated him from his mother's womb and separated him unto his own gospel, viz., that he would be in labors more abundantly. Yeah, it's confusing. In prison more frequently, in stripes above measure, in like getting whipped above measure, in death oft. That of the Jews he would 5 times receive 40 stripes, save one. What? That he would be 3 times beaten with rods, once he was stoned, and that he would suffer all this rejoicing and tribulations. Dude, no, Paul. So I'm actually going back a second where the black line is pointing. It says, perhaps then it was under those conditions that God separated him from his mother's womb. God saw the cause of the just separation, viz. That Paul would buffet his body and bring it into bondage because he feared lest, having preached to others, he himself might be rejected, and that knowing there would be woe to him unless he preached the gospel. Being moved with fear towards God. So why would Apollon be afraid of Zeus? This is the introduction for the Iliad. Alexander the Great slept with it underneath his bed. Rage goddess, sing the rage of Peleus, son of Achilles, murderous doomed that god that cost the Achaeans countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls, great fighters' souls, but made their bodies carrion, feasts for the dogs and birds, and the will of Zeus was moving toward its end. Begin muse when the two first broke and clashed, Agamemnon, lord of men, and brilliant Achilles. What god drove them to fight with such a fury? Apollo, the son of Zeus, and Leto. Incensed at the king, he swept a fatal plague through the army. Men were dying, and all because Agamemnon spurned Apollo's priests. So does everyone know who Apollo is? Like when his name's Apollon, and they're like they think people are Apollo. I'm talking about Paul from the Bible. Like I'm just saying. So what happened? Someone kidnapped Aphrodite. Like that's what happened with the Trojan War. And so like could it have been Apollo that kidnapped Aphrodite to like because there's a story of Apollo and Daphne like he's trying to rape her, and then she goes to Zeus to like protect him from raping her because like things got rapey back in the days. Like apparently everyone could rape each other. Like it was like acceptable. Like because we can rape our like previous selves. I don't even know. So Apollon releases this plague on everyone, and like he releases it on Jerusalem, and like in the book of John, clearly like everyone knows you're demon possessed if you're sick. Like, oh, that's a demon. Like, cause like why? The opposing power, like the spirit of Apollon, will release a plague on you, and they are 100% certain that Apollon did it. They've read the Iliad. They know what happened.